"You're being dramatic, he's just a friend." Those were Bethany's exact words when I finally worked up the courage to tell her how I felt after 2 years of competitive ballroom dancing together. I should have known better than to mistake our chemistry on the dance floor for something real, but when you're spinning someone through a perfect Argentine tango and the entire room disappears except for her eyes locked on yours, logic tends to take a back seat to hope. We just won our first regional championship in Nashville's competitive circuit, taking first place in Latin Division with scores that had the judges talking about our potential for nationals. I was riding high on adrenaline and champagne from the celebration afterward, thinking maybe this was the moment everything would change between us, the night we'd look back on as when we became more than just dance partners. The backstage area was buzzing with other dancers changing costumes and critiquing performances, sequined gowns hanging from makeshift racks and men adjusting bow ties while dissecting their routines with the intensity of war strategists. I pulled her aside to a quiet corner near the emergency exit where the industrial lighting made everything feel more honest somehow, away from the glittering facade of competition and performance. My hands were still shaking from the performance nerves, or maybe from what I was about to say, and I could smell her familiar perfume mixed with the stage makeup and hairspray that had become the scent of every competition we'd dominated together over the past year. I told her I'd been thinking about us outside of dance, about how connected we felt during our routines, about the way she'd look at me during our most challenging lifts like I was the only person in the world who could catch her, like she trusted me with something more precious than just her physical safety. I mentioned the late-night practice sessions where we'd order takeout and talk about everything except the obvious tension crackling between us, conversations that started about technique and ended with us sharing stories about our families, our dreams beyond dance, the ways we'd both ended up in Nashville chasing something we couldn't quite name. I explained how I'd started looking forward to those conversations even more than the dancing itself, how I'd catch myself watching the clock at my marketing job, counting down hours until I could see her again. I told her what I felt went beyond partnership, beyond the trophies we'd been collecting, beyond the technical precision that had made us one of the top Latin couples in the state. I was vulnerable, honest, probably more honest than I'd ever been with anyone about anything, laying out 2 years of accumulated feelings like dance cards spread across a table, hoping she'd been feeling even a fraction of what had been building inside me. Her response was immediate and brutal, delivered with the same clinical precision she used to correct my footwork during rehearsals. She didn't even pretend to consider what I'd said or acknowledge the months of chemistry I thought we'd been building through every rumba, every paso doble, every moment when the music stopped but we kept swaying together. Instead, she looked at me like I'd just suggested we abandon ballroom dancing to become professional mimes, with this expression of genuine bewilderment mixed with what might have been embarrassment or maybe just annoyance at having to deal with something so inconvenient to her perfectly organized dance calendar. "You're being dramatic," she said, emphasizing the word dramatic like it was something distasteful she'd found stuck to her shoe, something that needed to be scraped off and forgotten as quickly as possible. "I'm not interested in you that way, we're just friends and dance partners, nothing more, and honestly, Carter, I thought you understood that." The way she said friends made it sound like a consolation prize, something I should be grateful for instead of disappointed by, as if my feelings were some kind of amateur mistake that proved I didn't understand the professional nature of what we were building. She immediately shifted the conversation back to our next competition timeline, discussing song choices and costume fittings like the previous 5 minutes had never happened, like I hadn't just exposed the most honest parts of myself for her consideration. I stood there watching her reorganize her dance bag with the same methodical precision she brought to our choreography, realizing she saw me as exactly what she'd said, a useful dance partner who helped her win trophies and nothing more, someone whose primary value lay in his ability to lift her correctly and follow her lead. The drive home was 45 minutes of awkward silence punctuated by her excited commentary about our scoring breakdown and where we might place at regionals next month, as if emotional devastation was something that could be choreographed around like any other obstacle on the competition floor. Stung by her dismissive attitude and that word dramatic echoing in my head for days afterward, I decided to prove I wasn't dramatic by doing something completely undramatic. I stopped responding to her calls about practice sessions and competition schedules, declining all dance-related activities with believable excuses about family obligations and work commitments that sounded reasonable enough that she couldn't argue with them without seeming unreasonable herself. When she texted about our usual Tuesday evening rehearsal, I mentioned my cousin's engagement party that suddenly needed my help with planning, complete with details about venue scouting and vendor meetings that made the excuse sound thoroughly legitimate. When she called about costume fittings for our next competition, I had a work deadline that absolutely couldn't be moved, a quarterly marketing campaign that required my immediate attention and overtime hours that any professional would understand. Each excuse was crafted with the same attention to detail I'd once put into perfecting our choreography, designed to sound legitimate while creating the distance I needed to protect whatever was left of my dignity after her clinical dismissal of everything I'd felt. During group lessons at our studio, I maintained polite but distant interactions, treating her like any other dancer in the room rather than someone who'd once consumed my thoughts between competitions and filled my evenings with anticipation. I'd arrive exactly on time, participate in whatever exercises our instructor assigned with professional courtesy, and leave immediately afterward without lingering for our usual post-lesson coffee discussions about technique, upcoming events, or the hundreds of small observations that had once made me feel like we were building something meaningful together. The other dancers started noticing the change in our dynamic almost immediately, the way we'd gone from inseparable dance partners who finished each other's sentences to virtual strangers who happened to share the same floor space twice a week with the awkward politeness of former coworkers. I could see the confusion in their faces when Bethany would try to engage me in conversations about our partnership and I'd respond with the kind of professional courtesy you'd show a casual acquaintance, pleasant but thoroughly uninterested in anything beyond basic pleasantries about weather and traffic. She'd mention ideas for new routines or upcoming competitions with the enthusiasm that had once made me excited about our future, and I'd nod politely while checking my phone or adjusting my dance shoes, making it abundantly clear that whatever we'd built together was no longer my priority or even my concern. My withdrawal was methodical and calm, executed with the precision of a well-planned marketing campaign, the complete opposite of dramatic, which seemed to confuse her more than any emotional outburst might have. She was clearly expecting me to chase after her, to fight for our partnership, to prove that what we had meant something worth preserving despite her rejection of any romantic component. Instead, I was demonstrating that I could take her rejection exactly as she delivered it, with clinical precision and no additional emotional investment, treating our partnership like any other professional relationship that had run its course. During those weeks of careful distance, I started researching opportunities to transfer my marketing skills to entertainment companies in Los Angeles, viewing geographic distance as essential for my emotional recovery and professional growth beyond the suffocating familiarity of Nashville's dance scene. The entertainment industry offered exactly what I needed, a complete change of environment where my creative skills would be valued without any connection to ballroom dancing or the memories that came with it. I spent my evenings browsing job listings for film studios and entertainment marketing firms, places where I could use the same creative skills that had helped me design our competition strategies and promotional materials but apply them to projects that had nothing to do with ballroom dancing or the woman who'd made it clear I was nothing more than a useful accessory to her ambitions. The applications I submitted were thorough and strategic, each cover letter tailored to emphasize how my event planning experience from dance competitions translated perfectly to film premieres and promotional campaigns, how my understanding of audience engagement from watching judges score our performances could enhance movie marketing strategies. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was planning my escape with the same strategic thinking I'd once used to plan our dance career, except this time I was choreographing my exit from her world rather than our entrance into a higher level of competition that I'd foolishly thought might bring us closer together. 4 months later, I secured a senior marketing position with a major film studio in Los Angeles, specializing in promotional campaigns for romantic comedies and dance-themed movies that would have once reminded me of everything I'd lost but now felt like poetic justice. The interview process had been surprisingly smooth, with my dance competition experience translating perfectly into event marketing and audience engagement strategies that impressed executives who understood the value of someone who could read a crowd and deliver exactly what they wanted to see. At my farewell party at our dance studio, Bethany presented me with custom-engraved dance shoes featuring the date of our championship win, a gesture that felt more possessive than thoughtful, like she was trying to brand me with a reminder of what we'd accomplished together before I could escape completely. The inscription read Carter and Bethany, regional champions, March 15th, forever partners, and I accepted them with the same polite gratitude I'd show for any going-away gift, thanking her while internally noting how she'd chosen to commemorate our professional achievement rather than acknowledge that I was leaving because our personal dynamic had become unsustainable. The other dancers gathered around us with champagne and well wishes, talking about how they'd miss our performances and asking when I might return to visit, but all I could focus on was how Bethany kept touching my arm possessively whenever someone congratulated me on the job opportunity, as if she was trying to remind everyone that I belonged to her in some way that transcended professional partnership. I drove cross-country to LA over 4 days, packing away all dance memorabilia in boxes that went straight into storage and immersing myself completely in the high-pressure world of entertainment marketing where creativity and strategic thinking mattered more than perfect posture or synchronized movements. My new role involved creating campaigns for movies I once would have watched with Bethany, romantic dramas and dance films that required understanding both the technical aspects of performance and the emotional journey that audiences craved, skills I'd developed through years of competition but could now apply without the painful personal associations that had once made every romantic movie feel like a reminder of what I couldn't have. The irony helped me process my emotions while building professional credibility in an industry that rewarded innovation and results rather than perfect execution of predetermined steps, where my ability to analyze what made people connect emotionally became more valuable than my ability to execute a perfect foxtrot. My first major project was promoting a romantic comedy about ballroom dancing rivals who fall in love during competition season, and instead of triggering painful memories, I found myself analyzing it with the detached expertise of someone who understood exactly how authentic the chemistry needed to feel and what audiences would believe versus what would seem forced or artificial. The campaign I developed focused on the universal appeal of second chances and finding love in unexpected places, themes that resonated with test audiences and helped the film exceed box office expectations by 30% in its opening weekend, earning me recognition from senior executives who had been skeptical about hiring someone from outside the traditional entertainment marketing pipeline. Within 6 months, I was leading campaigns for multiple romantic films, my background in dance giving me insights into movement, chemistry, and emotional storytelling that my colleagues found invaluable for creating marketing materials that actually connected with viewers on a visceral level rather than just checking demographic boxes. The creative energy I'd once channeled into perfecting our routines and analyzing our competitors now flowed into campaigns that reached millions of viewers, each successful launch building my reputation as someone who understood both the technical and emotional elements that made romance compelling on screen. Career advancement became a powerful distraction from romantic disappointment, as I discovered that the same strategic thinking that had made us championship material could be applied to understanding market demographics, audience psychology, and the precise emotional triggers that made people choose one movie over another on a crowded Friday night. By the end of my first year, I was consulting with streaming platforms on their original content marketing and working with international distributors to adapt campaigns for global markets, my expertise in reading emotional dynamics proving invaluable for understanding how romantic themes translated across different cultures and demographics. The transformation was remarkable, not just professionally but personally, as I realized that the skills Bethany had dismissed as merely supportive to her ambitions were actually the foundation of a career that reached far beyond anything we'd accomplished together on a dance floor in Nashville, where I'd once believed that being her partner was the pinnacle of success. In Los Angeles, I made a conscious decision to join salsa classes and community theater groups instead of competitive ballroom dancing, deliberately choosing activities that wouldn't trigger memories of my partnership with Bethany while still allowing me to stay connected to the creative world I'd always loved. The salsa classes were held in a converted warehouse in Silver Lake, filled with people who danced for pure joy rather than trophies, where I could move to music without the pressure of perfect technique or synchronized choreography that had once defined my relationship with dance. Community theater offered something even more valuable, the chance to work behind the scenes on productions where storytelling mattered more than performance, where I could contribute my marketing insights to help small theaters reach audiences who genuinely appreciated artistic expression over commercial success. The contrast was remarkable, working with people who created art for the love of creation itself rather than the validation that came with winning competitions or achieving perfect scores from judges who evaluated technical precision over emotional authenticity. It was at a movie premiere where I was debuting a campaign for an independent romantic drama that I first met Iris, a film score composer who'd created the original soundtrack that perfectly captured the emotional journey I'd been trying to convey in all my promotional materials. She was standing near the sound booth during the after-party, wearing a simple black dress that seemed almost defiant in its elegance compared to the flashy designer gowns that dominated most Hollywood events, listening intently to her own composition playing through the speakers while taking notes on audience reactions in a small leather notebook. I approached her initially to compliment the score, explaining how her music had made my job easier by providing emotional cues that audiences responded to instinctively, but our conversation quickly evolved into something much deeper as we discovered a shared passion for understanding how different artistic mediums could work together to create experiences that resonated with people on multiple levels. Unlike my conversations with Bethany, which had always circled back to competition schedules and technical improvements, talking with Iris felt like exploring uncharted territory where every exchange revealed new perspectives on creativity, collaboration, and the delicate balance between artistic integrity and commercial appeal that made both our careers meaningful beyond just financial success. Our relationship developed through shared interests in storytelling and creative collaboration, with late-night conversations about how music and marketing could enhance each other rather than compete for attention, discussions that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with creative work in the first place before it became tangled up with romantic disappointment and professional obligation. We would spend hours analyzing how different musical themes could evoke specific emotional responses in audiences, and how that understanding could inform marketing strategies that felt authentic rather than manipulative, creating campaigns that honored the artistic vision while still reaching commercial goals. My marketing expertise complemented her musical talents perfectly, as I could help her understand how composers could position their work to reach directors and producers who valued original scores that enhanced storytelling rather than overwhelmed it, while she taught me to listen for emotional subtleties in music that could inform more nuanced marketing approaches that respected both artistic integrity and audience intelligence. Unlike Bethany, who had tolerated my creative ideas as amateur suggestions that occasionally proved useful for our competition strategy, Iris actively sought my input on her compositions and genuinely appreciated my understanding of how music affects audience emotions and commercial viability. She would play rough cuts of her latest pieces and ask for feedback on everything from pacing to emotional impact, treating my opinions as valuable contributions to her creative process rather than intrusions from someone who didn't understand the artistic demands of her profession. The difference was striking, working with someone who viewed collaboration as strengthening both participants rather than as a zero-sum game where one person's contributions diminished the other's importance. Our connection felt intellectually and emotionally balanced in ways I'd never experienced before, built on mutual respect rather than the competitive achievement and one-sided romantic longing that had characterized my relationship with Bethany, where I'd always felt like I was chasing someone who stayed just out of reach while never quite understanding what would make her genuinely happy. With Iris, collaboration felt natural and reciprocal, whether we were discussing how to pitch her music to film studios or analyzing why certain romantic themes worked better in different cultural markets. Conversations that strengthened both our professional capabilities and our personal bond without the underlying tension of unequal investment or mismatched expectations. She appreciated my insights into audience psychology and market dynamics, while I learned to understand music as emotional architecture that could support storytelling in ways I'd never fully grasped during my dance competition days when music was primarily a backdrop for technical execution rather than a partner in creating meaningful experiences. What made our relationship truly remarkable was the absence of competition between us, the way our different skills complemented each other without either of us feeling diminished by the other's expertise, creating a partnership where success felt shared rather than something one person achieved at the expense of the other's recognition. 2 years into my Los Angeles career, my innovative marketing campaigns for romantic films had earned me rapid promotions and recognition throughout the entertainment industry, leading to consulting work with streaming platforms and international distributors who valued my unique understanding of how emotional storytelling translated into commercial success. The campaigns I'd developed had become case studies in graduate marketing programs, with executives from competing studios trying to poach me for their own romantic comedy divisions, offers that validated my decision to leave Nashville and everything associated with my former life. Meanwhile, through social media and mutual connections from the Nashville dance scene, I learned that Bethany's competitive career had stalled disappointingly, her dreams of national championships crumbling as she struggled to find a new dance partner who could match the chemistry and technical precision we'd once shared. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was building a career that reached millions of people worldwide, she was trapped in the same small dance studios where I'd once believed our partnership represented the pinnacle of success. According to friends who still followed the competition circuit, she'd cycled through several unsuccessful partnerships that failed to replicate our championship success, each new partner lasting only a few months before conflicts arose over creative differences, practice schedules, or the simple fact that none of them could tolerate her increasingly demanding perfectionism without the emotional investment I'd once brought to our collaboration. Her Instagram posts revealed a troubling pattern of increasing frustration with the Nashville dance scene, posting bitter complaints about male dancers who lacked commitment to excellence, partners who didn't share her vision for achieving national recognition, and a local dance community that she claimed had grown complacent and unambitious since the departure of serious competitors who understood what it took to win at the highest levels. The contrast between our trajectories was stark and undeniable, my expanding Hollywood career offering opportunities one could never have imagined while dancing in Nashville studios, while her world seemed to be contracting with each failed partnership and missed opportunity to advance beyond regional competitions. Industry publications had started featuring my campaigns in articles about innovative marketing approaches, with one major entertainment magazine running a full-page profile titled "Marketing the Heart: How One Former Dancer is Revolutionizing Romantic Film Promotion," complete with quotes from directors and producers who credited my work with helping their films find audiences who genuinely connected with the emotional content rather than just attending for superficial entertainment. The recognition felt surreal, considering how recently I'd believed that my greatest professional achievement would always be winning regional ballroom competitions with someone who ultimately saw me as nothing more than a useful accessory to her ambitions. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Bethany had started teaching beginner dance classes at the studio where we'd once trained for competitions, a significant step down from the championship-level partnerships she'd pursued for years after my departure. The transition from competitor to instructor suggested that she'd finally accepted the reality that her dreams of national recognition were no longer achievable without a partner who shared both her technical skills and her emotional investment in success, qualities that apparently proved impossible to replace despite numerous attempts with different dancers who brought their own strengths but lacked the specific combination of abilities that had made our partnership successful. Her social media presence had shifted from confident posts about upcoming competitions to nostalgic photos from our championship days, images of trophies and medals that represented the peak of her competitive achievement, a time when she'd had a partner who was willing to invest everything in their shared success rather than treating dance as just another hobby or casual pursuit. The most telling sign of how far her prospects had fallen was hearing through former dance colleagues that she'd been asking about me, wondering if I might ever return to Nashville or consider partnering with her again for one final competition season, inquiries that suggested a growing awareness that she dismissed the best partnership she was likely to ever have. The reversal was complete. The woman who had once called me dramatic for expressing feelings was now the one reaching out desperately, while I had moved on to a life and career that fulfilled me in ways she'd never understood or appreciated. 6 months later, Bethany manufactured a reason to visit Los Angeles, claiming she was auditioning for dance roles in music videos and wanted to catch up with me during her trip, a transparent attempt to assess my life situation that became obvious when she extended her stay indefinitely and started showing up at industry events where she had no legitimate business being present. Her first text arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing marketing materials for a new romantic thriller, A casual message about being in town for auditions that immediately raised red flags given her complete lack of experience in commercial dance work and her history of viewing any dancing outside ballroom competition as beneath her artistic standards. I responded politely but distantly, suggesting we meet for coffee in Beverly Hills at a time and place that would limit the interaction to exactly 1 hour, giving her enough attention to satisfy basic courtesy without encouraging the deeper connection she was clearly seeking. During our awkward coffee meeting, she repeatedly tried to steer conversations toward nostalgic memories of our dance partnership while I kept discussions focused on professional topics and frequently mentioned Iris, making it clear that my romantic interests lay elsewhere and that our past partnership belonged firmly in the past where it could do no further damage to either of our lives. She attempted to recreate our old dynamic by suggesting we take a private lesson together for old time's sake, proposing that we could work on some of our classic routines just to see if the chemistry was still there, but I politely declined, explaining that I'd moved beyond competitive ballroom dancing into creative pursuits that better aligned with my current career and personal goals. Her growing desperation became apparent as she realized the person who once hung on her every correction and choreography suggestion had evolved into someone whose primary interests lay far beyond anything they'd previously shared. Someone who was genuinely content with his life choices rather than secretly hoping for a chance to return to what we'd once built together. What made her reconnaissance mission particularly transparent was her sudden interest in attending film industry gatherings where she would arrive overdressed and clearly out of place, attempting to network with entertainment professionals while lacking any relevant experience or connections that would make her presence seem natural or professional. I watched her navigate these events with the same determined precision she'd once brought to learning new dance routines, studying the social dynamics and attempting to insert herself into conversations about projects and campaigns she knew nothing about, all while keeping one eye on me to gauge my reactions and interactions with colleagues who represented the life I'd built without her. Her extended stay stretched from the planned week-long audition trip to nearly a month, with increasingly elaborate excuses about callback opportunities and potential collaboration discussions that anyone familiar with the entertainment industry would recognize as completely fabricated stories designed to justify her continued presence in my proximity. She started following my social media activity with an intensity that bordered on surveillance, liking posts from years earlier and commenting on professional updates with familiarity that seemed designed to signal to my colleagues and friends that we shared a history more significant than casual acquaintance. The most telling moment came during a film premiere afterparty where she approached me and Iris together, introducing herself with a forced brightness that couldn't quite mask the calculating assessment she was making of our relationship dynamic. Studying the easy intimacy between us and the way Iris naturally deferred to my industry expertise while also challenging my creative assumptions in ways that clearly strengthened our professional and personal partnership. I could see her processing the contrast between what we had and what she was witnessing, the realization that I'd found someone who appreciated my contributions rather than merely tolerating them, someone who saw my creative insights as valuable rather than occasionally useful suggestions from someone who didn't quite understand the artistic demands of serious competition or professional achievement. Her behavior became increasingly erratic as the reality of my contentment sank in, showing up at restaurants I'd mentioned on social media, lingering near my office building during lunch hours, and even attempting to befriend my colleagues through professional networking sites with connection requests that included oddly personal messages about wanting to learn more about my work in entertainment marketing. The desperation was palpable during our final encounter, when she cornered me after a screening event and launched into a rambling monologue about how she'd been reflecting on our partnership and realized that she'd made mistakes in how she'd handled our relationship, suggesting that perhaps she'd been too focused on competition success to appreciate the emotional connection we'd shared. I listened politely but remained unmoved, recognizing her words as a carefully crafted performance designed to elicit the kind of emotional response I'd once given freely but now reserved for someone who actually deserved my investment and vulnerability. When she finally returned to Nashville empty-handed, her social media posts took on a bitter edge, subtle digs at Los Angeles superficiality and entertainment industry fakeness that anyone who knew our history would recognize as directed specifically at the life I'd chosen over the partnership she'd once dismissed so easily. After Bethany returned to Nashville, She began sending lengthy messages filled with specific memories from our dance partnership and increasingly obvious hints that she might have misjudged my romantic potential 2 years earlier, desperate attempts to rewrite our history that arrived with predictable regularity every few weeks. Her texts would arrive late at night, carefully crafted essays about moments I'd forgotten or chosen not to remember, stories about how other dancers had commented on our chemistry and predictions that we were destined for something greater than regional championships. She would reference specific competitions where she claimed to have noticed the way I looked at her during our most intimate dance sequences, moments she now insisted had been filled with romantic tension that she'd been too focused on technical perfection to fully appreciate at the time. On my birthday, she sent a video montage of our championship performances with romantic music overlay. The same day Iris and I were selecting wedding venues in Malibu, the ironic timing so perfect it felt like the universe's way of highlighting how completely my life had moved beyond anything Bethany could offer or understand. The video was professionally edited, with slow-motion captures of our lifts and spins, close-ups on our faces during the most emotionally charged moments of our routines, and romantic piano music that transformed our competitive performances into something that looked like a love story she'd convinced herself we'd been living. When I posted engagement photos featuring me and Iris in a romantic dance pose at sunset on the beach, Bethany's response revealed her complete psychological breakdown and the delusions she'd been nurturing about our potential reunion. Her initial comment on the post was congratulatory but strained, something about wishing us happiness that felt forced and brittle, followed within hours by a series of private messages that grew increasingly unhinged as she processed the reality that I was marrying someone else. The first message was relatively composed, expressing surprise at the speed of our relationship and asking if I was sure I was ready for such a big commitment after everything I'd been through with previous partnerships. But as hours passed and I didn't respond, her messages became more desperate and revealing. She left desperate voicemails confessing she'd made a terrible mistake, claiming that seeing my success and happiness had made her realize I was the partner she'd always needed but had been too proud and focused on competition achievements to appreciate properly when we were together. The calls came at all hours, her voice thick with tears as she rambled about how she'd been thinking about our championship win and the way I used to look at her during our most challenging routines, moments she now claimed to understand were filled with a love she'd been too blind to recognize. She insisted that everything she'd accomplished since my departure felt hollow because she didn't have me to share it with, conveniently forgetting that her accomplishments had actually declined dramatically since losing the partnership she'd once taken for granted. Her messages became increasingly manipulative, suggesting that Iris couldn't possibly understand the creative connection we'd shared through dance, that our years of partnership had created a bond that transcended ordinary relationships and couldn't be replicated with someone who'd never experienced the intensity of competitive ballroom dancing. She claimed that watching our old performance videos had reminded her of the electricity between us, the way we'd moved together like we were sharing the same heartbeat, and that she finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her that night backstage when she dismissed my feelings as dramatic overreaction to professional success. The most disturbing message came 3 weeks before the wedding, a rambling voice note that lasted nearly 10 minutes where she detailed a dream she'd had about us dancing together at our own wedding, describing how perfect we'd looked together and how the audience had given us a standing ovation that went on for minutes. She talked about how she'd woken up crying, realizing that this dream was actually a vision of what our life should have been, and that she needed to tell me the truth about her feelings before I made what she called the biggest mistake of my life. Her final attempt to derail the wedding came in the form of a handwritten letter that arrived 3 days before the ceremony, pages of desperate pleading written in her carefully practiced penmanship, begging me to reconsider and claiming that she'd finally learned to love me the way I deserved to be loved. The wedding took place at a beachfront venue in Malibu with Iris's film industry colleagues celebrating alongside my new creative community, a gathering of people who understood and appreciated both our individual talents and our collaborative partnership. The ceremony was everything Bethany would have considered too simple and unpretentious, focused on meaningful moments rather than elaborate displays designed to impress judges or audiences who measured success through external validation. Instead of a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and formal place settings that would have satisfied Bethany's need for recognition and status, We chose an intimate outdoor setting where the ocean breeze carried Iris's original music and our vows could be heard by people who genuinely cared about our happiness rather than the spectacle of the event. Iris looked radiant in a flowing dress that captured the ocean breeze perfectly, her smile genuine and unguarded in ways I'd never seen from Bethany, who had always been performing even in our most intimate moments together. The vows we exchanged were personal and specific, references to late-night conversations about creativity and collaboration, inside jokes about musical themes that enhanced storytelling, promises to support each other's artistic growth rather than compete for attention or recognition. I spoke about how Iris had taught me the difference between partnership and performance, how she'd shown me that true collaboration meant both people becoming stronger rather than one person accommodating the other's vision. As we danced our first dance to a piece Iris had composed specifically for our wedding, I realized this was what partnership actually felt like, two people moving together because they chose to rather than because a routine demanded it, creativity flowing from mutual respect rather than one person accommodating the other's vision. The music was hauntingly beautiful, a composition that told the story of our relationship through melody and harmony, with crescendos that matched the emotional peaks of our journey together and quiet moments that reflected the comfortable intimacy we'd built through shared creative work. Meanwhile, unknown to us, Bethany had created fake social media accounts to obsessively monitor our happiness, her surveillance behavior escalating as she watched from Nashville while the wedding she had somehow convinced herself should have been hers unfolded in paradise. Through mutual friends who still followed our story, I later learned that she'd spent our wedding day posting cryptic messages about missed opportunities and the importance of recognizing true love before it's too late, bitter reflections that her remaining followers correctly interpreted as being directed at someone who'd moved on without her. She posted old photos of us from our championship days with captions about how some partnerships are irreplaceable and how success means nothing without the right person to share it with, desperate attempts to rewrite our history that only highlighted how completely she'd misunderstood what we'd actually shared. The contrast couldn't have been more complete, Iris and I beginning our married life surrounded by people who celebrated our success and understood our creative partnership, while Bethany remained isolated in Nashville, haunted by the realization that she'd dismissed the most devoted partner she was ever likely to find. In the end, she was left watching from the front row of the life she thought should have been hers, relegated to being a spectator to the happiness she'd once casually dismissed as nothing more than dramatic overreaction to professional success.